Okay, hold up. Before the video starts, quickly, this was filmed before your unbelievable response to my USA video kicked off, so I just had to get in and say that I'm so grateful. I appreciate all your comments, I read all of them, and they absolutely mean the world to me. If you saw the video and you liked the trip that we did and you want to do something similar whenever it's next safe, obviously, then this video is my attempt to show you that you can probably do it for less money than you thought. I hope that you find it helpful, and like I said, I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. I didn't expect any of this. So our trip from New York to LA without flying included New York City, Washington DC, Chicago, Salt Lake City, San Francisco, Monterey, and LA. It lasted 35 days and cost a total of $1,640, so that's an average of 45 or 46 bucks a day each. Or in my language, that's 1,200 quid and 33 quid a day each. And that's including everything: accommodation, Amtrak tickets, transport, food. That time I went whale watching, travel insurance that we bought in the UK. That time we got scammed by Greyhound, everything. So I've broken it down to the average daily cost, but obviously in a trip like this, there's going to be days that are really cheap and days that are really expensive. It varies a lot, and we didn't think of it as a daily budget or a daily spending target. We actually weren't that strict at all. Now, if you've seen the video, you know that we did house sit in DC, and obviously that brings the cost down, and it's not for everybody. So I actually worked out as well, what would the budget have been, what would the average daily spend have been if we didn't house sit in DC, and if we paid the rate that we were paying to stay somewhere in New York for the whole time we were in DC. That would actually bring the whole trip average up to about $55 a day. Still really good and cheaper than a lot of shoestring backpacker budgets that I've seen out there. If you follow a few basic things, you should have no problem crossing the country and seeing a lot of cool stuff on quite a tight budget. Now, I'm aware that even at $45 a day, we're so lucky to have been able to do this trip, and it's not affordable for everybody. But I think if you've got your mindset on doing a trip like this is actually quite a reasonable way to do it, and this is lower than most of the estimates I've seen online. It helps that the prices we paid are based on 2 people sharing. Always this will save you money, not just in accommodation, but also in cooking for yourself, because ingredients are a bit more economical when you're buying for 2 people. Now, these are all my personal opinions based on my experience of being an English tourist who knows absolutely nothing. So if you're an American and you know even cheaper ways to do things, let us all know in the comments. I just want to share what I think might help people who haven't done this kind of trip before, or to help people who would like to do something fun like this, but think that you can't afford it if you don't eat in restaurants and stay in hotels all the time. So that $45 a day each broke down like this. On long distance travel, we spent an average of $11.29 a day each. So that represents how the cost of our Amtrak and Greyhound tickets spread out if you share them over the whole trip. If you've seen my main video, you know that the advice about not using Greyhound is good, however cheap it may seem. Lots of people recommend a bulk bus for the same journey or just ride Amtrak. So to get cheaper Amtrak tickets, really the only advice is to plan early. There's only a certain amount of tickets at the cheapest price for each service, and they'll sell out quite quickly. In fact, I would say that at about $140 to $180 each in coach, California's effort tickets are an absolute steal anyway. If you see a good price like that and it's a journey that you want to take, then snap them up. It can add a little bit to the price if you do it in 2 or 3 legs with stops in between, just because then you're traveling on different days, but it's not that much of a difference. We actually booked most of our tickets at the last minute, and I know that increased our spend a bit. In fact, one time we actually paid to change our ticket, and that's included in my total, but it's such an unnecessary expense that can be avoided with a little bit of planning. And about which class to ride Amtrak in, only you can decide that for yourself. I did a whole video about why we were happy with the coach seats and to just eat food that we brought on from the grocery store, but if you want to have a cabin and eat in the dining car, then great. So on city transit, so that's bus and metro tickets, we spent an average of $3.20 each a day. In every city that we went to that had both of them, we rode both the metro and the bus, and we found it fine. I'm not saying public transport can take you to, like, I don't know, Badlands National Park or something like that, but if you're in a city and you want to get around, I actually found it to be not that much worse than Europe. And I mean, in some cases it was better than Europe. Like, if you had to decide between riding the DC Metro and the Paris Metro, I know which one I'd pick. So if you want to have a trip like this, but you don't want to drive around the cities or get taxis everywhere, you can still make it work and have a good time. Now, if I arrive to a new city tired and without a plan, I will spend the whole day's budget on a taxi to wherever we're staying. So it pays to do your research beforehand so you don't cave in and do that. This is how I try and find out how to get a travel card on my way to a new city. On the train or whatever, I'll look up a few things. I look up the page for that city on a site called Wikivoyage, and they have a lot of sections of information about each city, and one of them is to do with public transport, and it's called Get Around. And yes, the Beach Boys plays in my head every time I click that. In there, they usually describe what public transport is available, which modes are the best, and how you can get a travel card to use on it. Then I go on Google Maps and I look up where we're staying, look for directions to there, directions from the place that we get off the train at, and I hit transit directions, and there it will show you what options you have between bus and metro, how long they take and where they leave from. Yeah, when I got home I had a wallet full of travel cards from different cities. Most of them are great. The ones that you can tap are great. Obviously the New York magnetic stripe card, please swipe again. But the best one's actually in Chicago. You can just tap a contactless bank card like you can in London. If there's a few faraway places that you want to see, it's worth looking on Wikivoyage again to see if they mention a 24 or a 48 hour travel pass. If you can get one of those, then you might be able to save some money, because if there's a few faraway places that you want to see, you can see all of those while you have the pass, and then on your other days in a city you can just do the ones that are walking distance from where you're staying and not have to pay for any metro tickets. Now, one really cheapskate thing that we did that probably most people wouldn't do is we walked from Salinas Amtrak station to Salinas bus station, and we got a travel card there that you can tap on the buses, and we rode the normal bus to Monterey just because it was cheaper than getting the Amtrak throughway bus at that time. But once you do have a bus card for Monterey, that was actually pretty good because it meant that we could just walk as far as we wanted down the coastline. We had a couple of really long walks, and then we just ride the bus back instead of walking back. And on some days you can use that bus pass to ride down the coast actually as far as Bixby Canyon Bridge, which is pretty cool. So eating out, that's every time we went to a fast food place or a coffee shop or a restaurant, and we spent almost $60 a week on this between us at $4 a day each, and that actually surprised me because normally we're pretty good at making all of our own meals. Of course, this includes adding 20% to the price every time, which we happily did because it's the custom in your country. I think the cold played a big part in how much we spent here, and that's one thing I will say about what season you go in. We went in winter when demand is lower, so probably places to stay are cheaper, but do you really want to sit next to a frozen over Central Park trying to eat something that you packed but you can't because you're shivering? No, you want to eat a hot sandwich with fresh coffee next to a big heater somewhere, however much it costs. But we did end up spending in a bunch of local lunch places, which was fun. Our favourite being Pie Hole in Salt Lake City. We did spend $50 on a good dinner once, and yeah, I have zero regrets. We still got our budget so low and it was really good. It was a big feast basically at a diner, again in Salt Lake City. Not the most healthy, but I think probably that's what all the other meals that we cook for ourselves are for. So to anybody worried that you need to eat breakfast, lunch and dinner in restaurants every day, or you won't be able to have a big fun trip, just don't worry about it. I mean, if we just tried a bit harder, I think we do normally do better than this at keeping spending in this category down and always cooking for ourselves. But it's still not too bad a total for the USA, I don't think. And it's just a good thing that we didn't discover Chipotle until we were already on the West Coast, because yeah, after we had our first Chipotle burrito, this total did go up a bit. So in grocery stores, we spent almost $7 a day each. We still made almost all of our meals for ourselves on this trip, and that had a huge impact on keeping it down to $45 a day. I know food is really personal, and if you can't imagine traveling and going on vacation without eating in restaurants all the time, then that's great. It's just that for us, to do such a big trip as this, to see all the amazing places that we saw, really the only way that it's actually ever going to be possible is if we cook for ourselves. And I know there's other people who would want to travel more, but are probably quite intimidated by seeing on Instagram people eating in restaurants all the time while they're on vacation. So to you, I just want to say, hey, we're out here. If you think we had a good time in America, we were eating pasta and ramen all the time. So for me, crossing the entire USA and seeing all the things that we saw, if I have to do some cooking and skip some restaurants to make that even possible, then that's fine by me. We got groceries from Safeway mostly, Trader Joe's a few times, and Walmart sometimes as well. I think Trader Joe's was the best. Obviously, any Americans will probably know better than me, know where to get better, cheaper groceries. And if you go to Safeway, then you should ask for a membership card at the checkout, and then next time you go in, it'll be much cheaper. We ate a lot of wholemeal bread, jam, nuts, hummus, fruit. I thought fruit in the US was so cheap and really delicious. When we're traveling, we always have some fruit with breakfast and take some out with us for the day, and I was surprised how cheap that was in the US. We'd have bananas every day, apples, kiwis, strawberries and blueberries. Really, I was so surprised how cheap and delicious they were in America. And the same thing with oranges, actually. I had so many oranges while we were in America, and I probably destroyed my teeth doing it, but I knew that they were so delicious, and as soon as I went back home, the oranges wouldn't be as good anymore. I'm never eating a UK orange again. These are so good. So, worth it. And we'd make big dinners with pasta, lots of vegetables, maybe some meat-free meatballs sometimes, or if we're in a hurry, or just lazy, or we didn't want to cook in front of loads of people in the hostel we were staying in, then we'd just have ramen. And to make that a better meal on a budget, we add a can of chickpeas and some broccoli to the same pan. I never told you this was a gourmet cooking video, so everything else that isn't accommodation, we spent almost $5 a day on, and this includes the cost of travel insurance, cash that we got from ATMs, and I don't know what category we spent it on. That stuff just disappears, I swear. And this includes the expensive things we did do, like I bought a t-shirt from that bookstore that I went to, and we went up the viewing tower in Chicago, the John Hancock, not the Sears Tower, the other one. Obviously I went whale watching, that was so worth it. And we saw 2 movies in Salt Lake City. So I've always dreamed of going to these places, and just being there is enough entertainment for me. So apart from what I just mentioned, we didn't spend anything on attraction tickets. If you can't imagine doing a big vacation without going to theme parks and skiing and whatever, then that's great. But if you have a similar mindset, if you're just curious and you want to travel and see new places, then don't be put off because you can't afford those things. We couldn't, and we still had the best time. I do normally look up a couple of things first though. I'll look up the best free or cheap things to do in a given city, and loads of blogs will come up and give you ideas. Sometimes you'll find something that, you really don't want to miss. And I also look up unusual things to do in that city. And there's a website called Atlas Obscura. And for most cities that I've been to, they have a page with this title. And there's loads of things in there. Some things that you would have never heard of, but you'd be glad that you visit while you're there. I can recommend some free things for you to do. Obviously, Americans will know about all of these things. Like all good tourists, we rode the Staten Island ferry, which was so much fun, so amazing on our first ever day in America. And while we were on Staten Island, we went to historic Richmond town, which you can tell by the amount of footage of that made it into my video how interesting that was at that time of year. We rode the Roosevelt Island cable car, which was so much fun, and that's how I got those shots of flying over the taxis in New York. And I went up to this viewpoint in DC. It's the old post office tower, and the people working there are so nice and talked to me for ages, and there's some really good views up there. And we did tours of the Latter-day Saints Conference Center and office building. These were both really worth it, very educational, interesting, and in both cases we just walked into the lobby and there were people there who were just dying to take you on a tour for free. Now, as far as museums go, if you're into that, we've been to a ton of museums, and the Smithsonian museums in DC are the best. I don't care what anybody says about the museums in London. I don't care if this means I have to give up my British passport because I'm saying this. They're not as good as DC. The ones in DC, the Smithsonian museums, are interesting and educational and fascinating on a whole other level. And they're all completely free, but even if they were $10 a time, honestly, I would still recommend them in this budget video because they're just that good. So accommodation, I've left this till last because it takes some explaining. We have to talk about how absurdly low this is. This is not even $35 a day between us for a room every night, which I'm pretty proud of considering we were in the major US cities. So 2 things contribute to this. Of the 35 nights, we were actually sleeping on the train for 3 of them. This isn't free, but it's included in the cost of Amtrak tickets here, not in the accommodation budget, so that brings it down. But the major thing is that we actually house sat for almost 2 weeks in DC, so that's a long stretch of bringing the average down by not spending anything on accommodation. But like I said, I worked out, and if we paid the New York rate that we were paying for our whole time in DC, that would bring our daily average up to $55, so still a bit more achievable than some of the budgets you'll find online. I'm going to talk a bit more about house sitting at the end, but the other 2 main sites we used to find places to stay were Airbnb and Hostelworld. So on Airbnb, we like to go for a private room. This is a bit cheaper than getting your own place. You get your own room and you share the bathroom and kitchen with the people who live there. And it's not just cheaper, all the hosts that we met doing this in the US were so friendly and welcoming and helped us explore their city and get to know their neighbourhood. And in New York in particular, I think this is the only actual legal way to stay in an Airbnb. It has to be the spare room of the actual tenant, but the laws are changing all the time, so you might want to look that up. So on Airbnb, we like to filter by private rooms and ones that have a kitchen that you can use to cook your own meals in. And in most cities, we found really good ones of these, a big choice of ones with different reviews that we could choose from. The only places where that didn't happen, in LA and San Francisco, we just thought the Airbnbs were so expensive, and that's why we stayed in hostels. And again, on Hostelworld, we filter by one where you can have a kitchen that you can cook your own meals in. And both times we actually stayed in a dorm, and we had a really good experience. We had friendly and quiet roommates who didn't bother us at all. The beds were comfortable, and we had a locker in both places too. Always check the reviews to see if the lockers are good, and if you're planning on staying in hostels while you're in America, obviously invest in a combination padlock for your journey. Even if you're not cool with dorms, you might want to check Hostelworld too, because some of them have private rooms and then you share the bathroom and kitchen facilities with the people who have the dorms. And some even include breakfast, like the one in LA. They had fresh bagels, pastries, juice, coffee, probably fruit even, and probably some hotels have a worse breakfast than that. And the place we stayed in Monterey, that was kind of like a motel, we found that on the app Hotel Tonight. And I check Google Maps again whenever we're looking for somewhere to stay. I look at a few places I might want to go to in the city and how long it would take to walk or ride the bus between there and where the accommodation is. And sometimes you'll find that even if you have to spend more to get somewhere to stay that's quite central in the city, you can actually save money because you're not spending on metro tickets doing that. So again, like with everything, a bit of research can save you some money here, but basically find somewhere that has good reviews that you trust and where you can cook your own meals. So that's all the categories and how what we spent broke down, apart from a little bit of house sit talk at the end. But first, I just want to say that I think when you're making a budget for a big trip like this, you should be as realistic as possible, and I'd actually recommend that you plan for $10 a day to disappear. I bet I could write up a perfect budget with nothing going wrong that was more like $35 a day if I wanted to, but I would never go back to the US thinking I could actually stick to that and that it would be realistic, because when traveling, the perfect planned budget is just not realistic because all sorts of things happen, and you need to plan for probably about $10 a day to disappear. Otherwise you're going to go over your budget and be really disappointed or get into trouble. This happens in loads of ways and ends up getting spread out throughout all the categories that I mentioned, but for one thing, there's actual mistakes and problems that can happen, like when we had to give Greyhound $93 for new tickets for no reason. I mean, probably real Americans know to not use Greyhound and won't make that mistake, but somebody out there is probably going to get you. Or say you've been walking around all day and you can't stop yourself from walking into somewhere and buying hot food, even though you've got groceries at home. Or you can easily have a longer day out than you expected, or get a bit lost and end up spending more on metro tickets than you thought you would. Or you might want to give something to a charity collector. Or there's impulse buys, like when I got my t-shirt from that bookstore in San Francisco, I couldn't help myself when I was there, and that's fine. And we bought 4 movie tickets to kill time with our bags in Salt Lake City, things like that. You can't plan for them, but something will come up and something will make you spend money in ways that you didn't expect and that you could never plan for. You will make some mistake or indulgence, or the world will find some way to scam you, and that means $10 a day can disappear. So it's best to plan for that, otherwise you'll get yourself down. And you might have 5 perfect days in a row where no money disappears, and then you go out and you have a nice dinner out and 2 beers. So what is my advice for people commenting, asking how can they find house sits and travel cheaply that way? I know this isn't for everybody, but for us, we love cats and dogs, so it's a big win-win. House sitting is basically where you stay in somebody's house for free in exchange for looking after their pets while they're on vacation. And if you Google USA house sits, there's about 10 websites where people post listings saying that they want to find a house sitter, and you can contact them and normally contact as many people as you want once you're a paid member of the website. You have to pay to join, but obviously that's cheaper than paying for a hotel or even an Airbnb in most cases. This has so many advantages. For one thing, we're animal lovers, so we do just really enjoy it, but you get welcomed by somebody. Our hosts in DC were so nice, really welcomed us into their house in their neighbourhood and showed us around, and it's somewhere to stay while you're travelling that's almost free and gives you your own space to relax in for a while. Now obviously we would never leave a dog for more than a few hours depending on what the owners say, so to even scratch the surface of, like, for example, a Smithsonian museum, you have to go back in multiple trips. But for me this is not so much of a problem. I mean, imagine us in every other city we went to. We're staying in a little room and rushing around all day trying to see as much as we can in a few days, right? But in DC, if we get to spend almost 2 weeks there, then we can take our time, really relax and see the city in little afternoons out. That, honestly, that change of pace was really welcome to me. So in that way, by house sitting, you can actually get to know a city better. You walk the dog around it, you go to all the local grocery stores, and you spend more time there, but you can actually end up spending less. And my advice for finding a house sit is just to be very, very flexible at first. In fact, make this the first thing that you look for. Look on the websites, see if there's any opportunities that you like in areas that you want to go to with pets that you think you'd be able to look after and people who seem nice. And then take those dates, see if there's a train that can get you there that's a reasonable price, see if there's a trip to the next place that's a good price, see if there's a hotel or Airbnb or whatever in the next place that is a reasonable price. And do these things exist, or does it clash, with the time that the city's going to be really busy because of some festival or public holiday or something? Look into all these things, and if you think the trip's feasible, then go ahead and apply, and you might get lucky like us and get picked by some really nice people. It helped that before we went in the UK, we did a few shorter weekend house sits just to get some good references, and I think that probably made a difference. And we were so lucky we got picked by those nice people with that lovely cat and that lovely dog, who both of them we miss so much. And yeah, they said we could come, and we booked our flights to JFK for 4 days before we had to be in DC, and that was that. We were going to America for the first time ever, and we were so excited. Oh, and don't be late, whatever it takes. People have got to go on vacation, and they want to show you around and leave the key with you and show you how to look after their pets. Honestly, Amtrak is late so much, so if you're coming and you think there's any chance of you missing the time that you have to meet, just pay to stay in a hotel one night before you meet them, get to the city and stay there one night. It's still cheaper than paying for the whole time. Whew, that was all the information that I could come up with, and I really, really hope that's given you a good, realistic target to have in mind for your next vacation, whenever it's next safe. If you have any more questions, you can leave me a comment or follow me on Instagram. I'm posting pictures from our trip to the USA, pictures from our new life. We live in Germany now, which is cool. And you can message me on there as well if you want. Here in Germany, we're in a really good place to travel more and make more travel videos when we can. Obviously, we can't right now My next videos are going to be just a relaxing, calming look at the area that we're living in. I shot a couple of walking videos when it was snowing in Germany, even though I didn't know I'd have this amazing audience. I really hope you like them. There'll be a bit of a change of pace, but I hope that they can be a nice, calming part of your day when they come out. And like I said at the start, I'm just so grateful. Thank you so much.